Okay, today what we're going to do is talk about something that we've really not put much, energy into for the life of the project, really, which is odd because it was so deeply ingrained in the dispute between us and the project we came from. And that dispute, by the way, was entirely one-sided. I mean, there was no two sides. It wasn't a dispute as it were. It was essentially they had some really weird ideas about how things ought to go, and it didn't make any sense, and ultimately it killed the notion that we would ever be friends with them. Essentially, what they said on this secondary token that exists on our project, because it also exists on the project we came from, what they said is as long as we preserved it, as long as we kept it in there and airdropped it to them, right, to all the people that held them on their chain, then we would be welcomed as a supportive and friendly side chain, so to speak. Sidechain isn't the right exact terminology there. Sidechain has another meaning in crypto, but we would be as supportive and friendly, and we would be supported, and they would be friendly to us. And we had no problem with that. We said, sure, not a big deal. In fact, when we first forked the blockchain and first did the emission, we said we didn't even make any for ourselves, right? We just made theirs and said that's what it's going to take to buy their piece, and we don't care. We're not going to do them, right? We just aren't going to have them in our project. And of course, it all went sideways, but without getting into how it went sideways and why it went sideways, all I'll say is simply this, because this tells you everything you need to know. The lion's share of the ones that we originally minted went directly to the Saya developer team, right? That was the way they have things set up over there. 85% of them belong to the team. And so that's where the things were forked to. And I was asked, I asked their founder, I asked him, because I had a cordial relationship at that point, where he wanted them sent. He gave me an address, and then we got closer to the fork, and I said, I want to just make sure that this is the right address. Yeah, it's the right address. And then I asked a third time before we pulled the trigger, and he confirmed it a third time. And so that's where we sent on Genesis block all of those 10,000. Well, we sent the 8,500 to that address, and then we kept the other ones aside, and we're going to hand them out manually one by one as people came through with KYC. And what happened, or maybe actually, I may have that wrong. I think actually they did get airdropped to where they were supposed to go in that first 10,000. So for the first 10,000, they all did get airdropped to the people that owned them. And so everything seemed like it was fine, right? Except he gave me an address he knew he didn't have the keys to. He gave me an address that he had admitted years before that he had lost the keys to that address. So he knew I was sending them to a burn address. And that informs everything that happened over the next 2 years between that project and ours. And what ended up coming out of that, because we continued, we still tried to make it work even after that, quite some time after that, actually. But finally, when it became clear that, they were just terrorists and they were never going to not stop being terrorists, we just said, you know what, we're just going to make these things the right way, and we're going to do them for our own benefit. And if the other 1,500 over there, want to come along for the ride and be part of this thing, great, we'll, accept them. And it'll be what it'll be. So what we did is we did a fork, and that fork came up at, I think it was block 109,000. And that fork changed the emission from 10,000 units, because 10,000 units is a really weird number, right? 10,000 units over there, they had these things over there for several years, but with only 10,000 tokens, for them to really do anything, they had to become worth an awful lot of money a piece. And they did. They actually became worth, I mean, there were actual anecdotal reports in January of 2018 of single units selling for $20,000 a piece. So they were pretty crazy. I mean, they went wild. And they started out, they were only like $90 a piece. But before I go further on that, let's go ahead and go backwards, because there are a couple things we're going to need to talk about SPFs so that we don't get into trouble, right? Because we're trying to do everything on the up and up here, and we're trying to make sure we're doing things the right way. And these things, when I describe them, you will understand them to be definitely securities. So when they were first minted, they were minted on another blockchain, and that blockchain essentially put them out, and they were called SIA notes. And they did a thing over there. They realized, hey, we can use these things to generate funding for our development efforts. So let's go ahead and let's create something. We'll call it, because back then, the way you went public with stock was called an internet public offering. They said, well, or not an initial public offering for stock. And over there, what they said is, let's build something. We'll call it an internet public offering. And I guess they forgot to open up like Law 101, right? Because, completely, totally, clearly illegal. And they sold a couple 100,000 of them that way, and, didn't catch the interest of the SEC yet at that point. And that's how a bunch of them got into the wild to begin with. And they raised a few $100,000, and it was what it was. And then they moved forward, and they got more money from China. They got some money from some other places, and but they didn't give away very many of them. They kept most of them. They never made any attempt to list them on an exchange or whatever. And then the SEC came calling, and the SEC said, you know what? You guys broke the law here. How do you want to handle it? Do you want to go to jail, or you want to claw back the money? What do you want to do? And they apparently made an agreement to go ahead and give back the money plus a penalty. And so they got sanctioned by the SEC for these exact units, right? So that puts an immediate sort of, blocking around this whole thing about what we can and what we can't do. And that's why we haven't talked much about them. That's just completely and totally why we haven't talked much about them. So coming back and going forward, those units over there on that blockchain ended up accruing what ended up being roughly $7,500 as a average value. If you went back over the history of them, that tended to be the sticky place where they sort of stayed. They've now dropped a bit because the project is in a little bit of chaos. One of the founders has left acrimoniously. There's been a number of internal things that have happened, and so it's not really clear what's going to happen. But at the end of the day, that there are people that are dealing them off at prices below what has been the average over the last several years. So we don't really know what the value is over there. We don't really know what's going on with that project. We don't know if they're going to get any storage or whatever going forward. So it is what it is. In our case, we never really got any value behind them because we've never talked to anybody about them. So nobody really knows what they're worth over here. And the question then becomes, well, how are they actually out in the wild? How do some actually exist in people's hands? And so what happened was we went out and we did two pre-seed rounds for stock equity. We raised some money on two pre-seed rounds. And in those both circumstances, what we did is we found accredited investors, mostly in the USA. A couple of investors came in from overseas, but mostly accredited in the USA. And essentially, in that world, when you're selling something or giving something to accredited people, the USA has a funny little thing about it, which says that if you're wealthy, you're more intelligent than everybody else. And so if you're accredited, you don't need to have to pass any weird muster or anything like that. And conversely, is essentially what they're saying is if you're not wealthy, you're stupid. So you are going to get taken advantage of. So, giving units away to the public was not really going to be a thing. But giving them to the people that could invest in the corporation was a nice thing. And it was a thing that we could actually effectuate pretty easily. And we explained to them clearly, what the tokens did and so forth and such. And like we usually do, because we're not building something, what happens in crypto is that founders tend to hoard everything for themselves. And then they give out, a little bit to some people that have the ability to go out and take them to the moon and then when it comes time to go to the moon, them and their friends and partners all get out quick and everybody else is left holding a bag. And if you don't really believe that, I mean, you haven't been around through multiple cycles, because it just keeps happening over and over and over again. And that's not what we wanted to do. So we gave out a lot of these things. 40% of the supply actually were given out to these people who helped invest in the corporation and get us off the ground and make this software a reality. So these guys are sitting on a whole bunch of these units. They don't have the same constraints on them that I do, right? I can't sell them to you because they're securities. And then I would have to go out and I'd have to issue a prospectus, and I'd have to have 14 pages of risks. And it would have to take into consideration all the various state rules in the United States and perhaps even get into international rules. I could do it, but in the end, it ultimately turns into a real nightmare. I do have other ways that I can get them out there, and we'll talk about that a little bit further down the road in this call. But what ends up happening is that, you know, they can go ahead and do anything they want with them because they are just selling something that they already acquired legally and perfectly fine as a piece of property to somebody else. There's nothing against that. There's no law against that. There is a law against me selling them to raise money for my corporation without following some sort of Reg D exemption or doing the research that I just mentioned. So that's why we can't really do that. But that's why there's a really interesting situation that's raised its head. I've made it clear to everybody that the project now has sort of essentially launched our product. It's been a pretty soft launch. We've been very kind of like circumspect and not getting out there and saying, hey, this thing's going to beat Amazon by Thursday. But at the same time, it works and it's working pretty good. And we just added a 50 gigabyte free tier for everybody. So if you don't believe it works, it doesn't cost you anything to prove it to yourself. And you can go and upload 50 gigs of stuff and put it on the network. Only thing you have to do is agree to the terms of service and you're in good shape. And the thing works correctly now. It actually will bill you all the way as you go along. So end to end, we have a product launch and we will get out there and start putting that marketing out on the street very shortly. But same time, I don't have any money, right? Because we put all our money into developing this thing, and then we stretched out the development about as far as we possibly could. And now we're in a place where, you know, all the money that we've raised, you know, has gone to pay for salaries. And the funny part about it is that when we look at the old project, it turns out that, you know, part of the thing that kind of killed them or hurt them is that they had some just enormous salaries that they were paying. Their salary note was apparently gigantic. And in our case, our developers are really, you know, been more than satisfied with taking what are by all measures reasonable salaries in order to get to the next place, which is the place where the stock becomes worth something really a lot, and where, you know, the project rises and takes its rightful place out there in comparison, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, our salary nut isn't all that huge, but at the end of the day, we're, you know, running it down, and we don't have that much longer to go before we're actually in a place that we don't want to be in, a pretty bad place. But we do have things that we're doing. So the Examiners sort of got us through most of 2022. And now the licensing is picking up and carrying us further, but the licenses don't generate as much revenue. So you have to sell more of them and so forth. But at the end of the day, there just isn't that many people on the network in order to generate a giant amount of revenues off them. So we have to kind of accept what we're going to get there. Well, the investors approached me and said, well, hey, look, why don't we do something? And I said, that's a great idea. As long as you don't involve me in terms of, you know, me having to do anything, right? You know, as long as it's just me telling people what these things are and how they work, and, you know, giving you the lowdown on how they were formed and all of that sort of stuff, then I'm in the clear and you can do whatever you want to do. And if it's to support the project, why wouldn't you? You know, you're vested in it. So, hey, that sounds like a great thing. And so today, hang on a second, we have a special guest that we're going to bring up. Who we're talking to today, for everybody, Ian Ravenscroft is an investor in the project. And actually, you can learn a little bit about Ian by going to the website, because he's actually listed under our what's the word, guides or somebody, counselors or somebody who gives us advisors. And he's been involved in crypto a lot longer than I have. And in fact, one of the things about Ian, along with Jeff, they were both actually back in the early 2014, 2015, whenever it was, were in those original NXT threads where Saya was born and owned Saya notes. So they were guys that had these things from the beginning. Why don't you start there, Ian, and tell us a little bit about your sort of getting involved in this whole thing?
Well, where do I start? I mean, I was involved in crypto with Bitcoin miners back in 2010, 2011, and then discovered NXT. A little bit too late to miss its genesis, where I could have been very rich for a Bitcoin, which was not very much back then. But it had one of the very first online asset exchanges on its chain, and it was used to fund a lot of projects actually. Zem, which some people may have heard of, Waves, IOTA, and Saya were all bootstrapped on that chain in terms of their funding. So a lot of people in NXT at the time did buy into a lot of those projects, and whether they sold early or later, did quite well. So I ended up owning some Saya fund, and got some of my first SPFs as a result in the airdrop when you bootstrap the chain, Ken. So thank you for that. It's a really neat token concept, particularly how SC Prime uses it, because they are there in volume and number to actually be useful, because they generate a revenue for supporters of the chain, whether those supporters are users, storage providers, or the corporation itself. And like I say, with 200 million of them, they're there in a number which actually makes them useful. We approached Ken, myself on behalf of a number of SPF holders. And what we said was, we want to help the corporation generate interest in the products it's trying to shift and trying to sell. But what we don't want to do is create more downward pressure on the SCP token. The more of that that leaves the corporate wallets right now in this crypto freeze, the more we're going to see, buy sell pressure. We don't want to see that. So I'll cut to the chase. We decided that the corp's done a really good job with the XMiner miners and the rebates and the bonuses, and the XMiner owners have done very well. And I know that a lot of XMiner owners also have a basic license which they can run with or they can upgrade. And I know on this call there'll be a number of people like myself who are DIYers who have invested and have their own full license. So we decided that we should show the DIY miners some love. So what we're going to do is this. For every fully licensed DIY miner that is on the network on the 1st of April next year, that has a full license, 3 months service and 95% uptime, they will all automatically receive 1,000 SPF into their wallets. And we can do that from the information the corporation puts up on Grafana. If there are more than 1,000 DIY miners, I have 1 million SPFs in this fund. So I can bonus 1,000 miners. I know that. We only have 100 and something full licenses. I made sure I got a fund that I think will beyond the licenses the corporation will sell. But if by some miracle the corporation sells more than 1,000 miners licenses in the next month, we will do it on length of service. So 3 months is the minimum. If we have more than 1,000 miners qualifying for that, then we will prioritize the first 1,000 longest serving miners. I don't think we'll end up in that situation. And the key is this: the full license needs to have been purchased by the end of October. So we can see from the data when it was bought. We won't need to know anything about you, who you are, where your node is, whatever. This will be done in a purely decentralized way. We will use the information that's available. We will pick up all the full licenses on nodes that are live on the 1st of April, and we will send 1,000 SPF. And all you have to do is, if you have a full license, nothing other than run your miner with a good service. If you don't have a full license, upgrade one if you want to get the bonus and register it to your miner. And if you don't have a DIY miner, but you have a ZAR miner, so you already have a basic license, then upgrade and then set one up. And like I say, it will be automatic after the 1st of April to all qualifying miners. This is managed by the community. It is not run by the corporation. And it's the community of investors that's come together to put 1 million SPF on the table for this.
Do you have any sense of what these things are valued at? I mean, have you guys talked amongst yourself? Do you have any kind of idea of what the benefit is?
I'm not going to get sucked into pricing on this call to a large degree. What I would say is, for those of you who know me, I have been the escrow for the SEA fund market on the Green project. I sit in both projects. I refuse to allow the animosity to spoil my relationships with both. And I personally escrowed over 500,000 of sales over the years, and the average price of those is somewhere in the region of $7,000 each, and that's a pretty solid average. It has come down recently, but it really is, pretty much a token that you have to value based on growth and income over time, and percentage returns. And I know some of the community are now starting to look at that, and I'm doing a little spreadsheet of my own. And I will put something in Discord on what I think the pricing could look like. Right now, it's somewhere between $0 and $1. I think the sweet spot is somewhere between probably.
I didn't mean to pin you down. I didn't mean to pin you down on it. You're welcome to discuss it in the channels. Really hard.
Any number I give is going to set in people's mind, and I think it's a number that you have to come to based on I think consensus is a really good word here. And what I would like to do is see more information in the SPF channel on Discord and see what the community consensus is, because it is all about having a community vision of the future of where we're going in terms of storage trajectory and so on. I did some curve plotting based on the storage growth over, and if I use 6 months worth of data, then actually the storage projection we get is it's not that great. But if you use the last 3 months worth of data, the storage projection we get is astronomical. So I think it's very, very early in terms of figuring out and the thing about these things is, the more storage we get, the more has to be collateralized, the more SCP is going to get locked up, the more SCP is going to go up in value. And, these things are earning based on contracts that are placed now. So a contract placed for a terabyte $4 now, when that contract comes out and when you claim the SCP that your SPF has earned, you know, the earnings that SPF has made may have doubled or tripled or it gone up by even more. So on top of the basic income that the SPF will get based on purely just earning coins from contracts, you've got to look at the fact that right now, I believe, you know, our utility token is at a rock bottom price, for a whole host of reasons. The exchange it's on, where the market is, so on and so forth. Yeah. And the fact that everybody's selling their children just to pay their power bills. So, you know, it's a very difficult world we're in. This isn't, you know, something that's going to make people rich tomorrow. But I truly believe and I truly hope that giving all of the supporters of this project now these 1,000 SPFs is something that's truly going to make some small difference to their lives in the future when the project is successful. And that's why we're doing it, and no other reason. Okay?
Yeah, that's really great. Let me put a couple of sentences together on exactly what the SPFs do. If you haven't read the thing inside the announcements channel, there's a paragraph in there that describes them, and there's not an awful lot really to describe, but let me go ahead and run through it here really quick. So the utility coin on our network is SCP, and that is used to actually pay for storage directly in these smart contracts that are created between the corporation and the distributed data center. On top of that sits this SPF token, and this token is nothing more than a taxing vehicle. It's a token that just sits there and watches the blockchain, and every contract that goes off, it takes 10% of every transaction, every contract transaction for storage on both sides of the contract. It takes 10% from the renter side, which is the corp, and it takes 10% from the host side, which is the distributed data center, you people. But what happens is when the contract is fulfilled, that 20% is actually all paid by the renter. The providers don't pay that. It's the corp that actually ends up paying out those funds off of the revenues and monies that they've gone out and gotten off of customers to onboard storage onto the network. So a population of 200 million exist, and 20% of all contractor transaction volume is pulled day in and day out. It's all automatic. We don't do anything about it. We've not, had to do anything about it for since we set it up. It's automatic, and those SCP coins are pulled out automatically and then chopped into 200 million bits and then sent out to the addresses that currently hold the SPFs. So if you buy some of these SPFs, or you get them gifted to you or whatever, as soon as you get them into your wallet address, you will start accruing SCP coins immediately from the transactions that are going on the network. And so if you think about that, you can calculate sort of an annual yield, but you can't calculate a yield based on any kind of, well, we can earn 15% because of X. That doesn't exist here, because if it did, that would be problematic, because that would put us into one of those weird legal situations. But here the situation is you're going to earn based on how much storage we go out and sell. And if we go out and sell a lot of storage and onboard a lot of storage onto the network, then you're going to earn a lot of SCP coins off these SPFs. And if we don't sell a lot of storage and the project doesn't ultimately end up doing very well, then you're probably not going to do very well either. So you have to really determine for yourself whether you really believe in the project. Now, the last thing I'll say before I'll ask Ian a couple more questions is the thing that typically happens in these kinds of situations, because this is the jewels right here. These are the jewels. And what ends up happening in crypto is you don't get the jewels, right? You aren't usually one of the ones that gets the jewels. the jewels go to the founders and their friends, and that's just the way it's always sort of been. Well, kind of what happened here to a degree, right? With the project still owns the majority of them, and the people that invested in the corporation did get them, but they didn't get them in any kind of a way that makes them really into that sort of standardized, we're going to run this thing up and then dump it on everybody. That's not a thing. We've not even discussed listing these things yet. We don't even know where and when they're going to be listed because they don't need to be listed, right? That's the beauty here. They don't ever even need to be listed. Yes, they will add value to you by being listed, where you can go out and sell them at will and dispose and liquidate of your asset if you want. But they actually exist to pull SCP off the chain from transactions. So Saya's never listed them. So, it's that kind of a situation. I'll talk in a little bit about what we think about listing and some other things that are going on there. But at the end of the day, if you think there's going to be a lot of storage on the network, you'd probably apply a higher valuation to these things. If you don't think there's going to be a lot of storage and you don't think we're going to make it, well, the first question I'd ask is, why are you here? Because it's the middle of the day and you could be out in the sunshine touching grass. But since you are here, I'm going to guess that you recognize the proposition here, and you're probably pretty excited about this 1,000. So that's the first step, and that's crazy. 1 million, they're giving away 1 million of them. That's all right. That's a pretty nice thing. So this is going to be tied to these full licenses, and there's these million here, and they're going to be handed out based on, essentially unlock hash and uptime and time in service and so forth. Is this it, or do you guys have some other things up your sleeve that I don't want you to announce anything right now, but is this just sort of a one-off thing you're doing, or are you guys pretty committed to doing whatever's necessary to make this thing succeed?
We want the project to succeed. It's not the only SPF fund we're building. We are also going to announce, well, we have announced that we will be also putting some SPFs on the market. But this is in a locked fund. Where
what about the 2 petabytes? Is there something out there having to do with guessing
the
petabyte number?
Oh, well, I mean, I have launched a competition for 2 petabytes, and there'll probably be one for 3 and 4. And I ran one for 10, but it was probably a little bit early, so I'll rerun it. And there will be a £10,000 prize, a 10,000 SPF prize for the 10 petabyte one, and so on up. Whether I do
don't make it £10,000. The pound isn't worth anything.
No. Well, they might be worth £1 by then. You never know. I can hope. It's late.
Yeah,
here
but if they become worth £1, it's because the pound turns out to be worth nothing, right? Not because they become worth a lot more.
Well, actually, yeah, I am having to update my exchange rates daily at the moment. Sorry, it's getting a bit late here in the Middle East, which is where I am right now. I think it's 10 past midnight. Oh God, yeah. So I won't stay with you much longer. We are running I ran a competition for 1 petabyte. I ran one for 2. I will run others to try and drive community interest. And we are still looking at some other ideas, which we'll put over time. But I think you can do too much all at once. I think what we're going to do at the moment is we're going to run this bonus for the full license holders. We're going to run the competitions as the network drives through more capacity. We'll look at other ideas. We might look at a faucet just for a bit of fun sometime, maybe around the holidays. I think we'll look at how we can get more and more of these out in the community over time in a way which benefits the project. I think there's a real advantage to these not being listed at the moment because no one can do a fire sale. No one sitting on a chunk of these can actually do, an exchange-based fire sale of these tokens. It can't happen. So the value is the value, and I think we'll see as they enter into the community. Some people will trade them formally and informally, as I'm sure, and we'll see what they become. Well, it'll be interesting. Oh yeah, and the competition for 2 petabytes, it's been posted in multiple Discord threads and on Facebook. I always put it in both communities, so you can find it. You just need to go and fill in the form by the 1st of October, which is when I'll turn the form off.
Where are we right now? We're like at 165, it looks like, petabytes. So, and it's going up pretty quick. We were just at the beginning of September. Yeah, it's gone up a lot.
I was looking earlier, it was 158. Okay.
Who's in charge of that?
Yeah. It's all those free 50 gigs you're giving away, Ken. Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah, well, there you go, right there. Free 50 gigs. I mean, everybody here probably is going to go online tomorrow and set up a relayer just because they want to fill up 50 gigs on the network just so that they can win the 2 petabyte SPF competition. This whole thing's like a big flywheel just spinning in one direction, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay.
Fantastic. Hey, I really appreciate this effort you guys are undertaking, and I think it's ultimately going to be really productive. I love that you're giving it to the community first, the supporters, the people that have put money into this thing. I love that it's, backing the full license, because the full license is something I've said that every one of you people are going to end up needing when it's all said and done. We just can't do the things like compliance and all of the other stuff that we're talking about doing in order to deliver the highest quality and the bestest data that's out there. So look, we're already giving you $225 back off of the full license purchase. Now you're getting 1,000 SPF. And does this cover people that bought already this year, or are they going to be left out in the cold, or is it pretty much everybody?
Well, no, we thought really hard about this, and that's why we're not actually linking it to any sales right now. We are, in the sense that we have to put an end date on it, because we want to stay in line with what the corp's doing around incentives. So we're saying all licenses, historic and new, purchase before the 1st of November 2022, that are in service on the 1st of April with at least 3 months of service, and not the standard 95% or greater uptime and so on, so giving good service, we'll get the bonus, as long as there's not more than 1,000 of you. And if there's like 1,010, then I'll find the extra. If there's 1,500, I probably can't, but you get my point. Yeah.
This is amazing. Just fantastic. So even if you bought back in April or May or whatever, as long as you're there at April when the time comes, you're going to get comped with these units. That's amazing. So you're getting money back even if you've already made all your money back. That's beautiful.
These guys, the guys who bought early shouldn't lose out, because they had the faith to get the full license early. So before even the software or the product was there, they gave the corp their money. So we wanted to reward that. And I want to stress, I am coordinating this, but pretty much every single investor who received SPFs from the corporation has has contributed, and I'm not talking about 1 or 2 SPFs. I'm talking in the hundreds of thousands to get to the million fund. So there's a lot of guys behind me that we won't list who's contributed what, but pretty much everyone who's been behind this project from the start has made a donation to make this happen. Okay.
I think everybody sees it the same way, right? They see it as this is a multi-stage rocket, and we have to get into the atmosphere and then out into space before we can actually get anywhere with this thing. And this is sort of one of those booster stages that gets us up there.
absolutely. And there is a question in Discord, and I'll be clear. This is not for an individual. This is for the miner. So if you have bought 3 miner licenses and you have 3 miners running, all with their own wallet addresses, and they're all run for more than 3 months and they all deliver the uptime and everything else, then each miner will get a bonus.
It's per full license purchase. So if you bought an upgrade from a basic license, then you get it. If you bought an upgrade from the basic Examiner free license to the full license, then you get it. So 3 full license qualifies for 3,000 SPF because he's paying it directly to the unlock hash. He's not paying it to the person. He's paying it to the provider ID.
I just want to pick up on this point. I don't care about purchasing, Ken. That's a corporate thing. Yeah, that's for you guys. I care about fully licensed miners in service. I don't care how they got the license. Okay, whether they got it free for you or something else, whether they upgraded from a basic license, whether they upgraded from a free basic license, that's your licensing model. What I care about is that there's a full license on that miner in service, and then it gets the bonus.
Right.
How it got
it doesn't have to be an Examiner. It can be DIY, something you built yourself. It can be anything,
Oh, no,
as long as it's a
it
live
has to
instance.
be. So these are fully licensed DIY miners. I am not adding to the bonuses that the EXA miners have already had. So this will be the fully licensed DIY miners. Yeah.
Right, but also you are agreeing to bonus the free license.
Yeah. But not rebonusing the EXA mining unit itself. Yeah. Just for clarity. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Well, that's a fantastic deal. I mean, it's you don't have to really do anything except what you're already doing. Just get these, units set up, get the stuff out there, and keep your uptimes up. And this time or in April, you will see in your wallet an automatic new thing show up. And then after that, it's Katie bar the doors. So the whole notion here is that I guess what this should ought to do is it ought to cause a few people to go out there and acquire licenses. Remember, as of October 31st, the rebates are going to end. We are stopping them on October 31st. And there's a reason for that. It's because we don't have more SCPs to give out on rebates beyond that sort of timing frame. So essentially, if you don't buy by the 31st, you're going to end up having to pay full boat for your full license. So if you say, well, I'll wait and see how things work out and blah, 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 you're not going to get the 225 back. And it looks like you're not going to get these SPFs either. So I would say there's a pretty good reason for you to get out there and maybe buy a license right now.
And the reason why we've only said 3 months of service is we recognize that you need some time between buying your license and getting your node up and running and in service. So essentially, you need to buy a license by the end of October, but you only need to get your node up and running by January.
Cool. All right, man.
So you can have, everyone's going to be having discs for Christmas.
If you're talking about this with other investors in a private Discord or somewhere other, another Telegram channel or something, I don't really want to know about it because I know you're probably talking about me as well. But at the same time, tell everybody thanks because this is really an amazing thing, and I take my hat off that you guys have thought this up and it makes a ton of sense and. I hope everybody sees it for the gesture that it is. And ultimately, I think you guys are all going to come away from this in pretty cool shape. So thanks a lot, Ian. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I'm going to get some sleep now because it's 12:20. Enjoy the rest of your day, guys.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions now, and we'll talk a little bit further about this. We did want to talk a little bit about the launch, but I don't think we're going to get into that today. We'll just keep this whole episode about SPFs and go from there. So if you have any questions or you want any information about SPFs, how they work, how this whole sort of licensing thing is working, what you need and so forth and such, now's your time to ask those questions and go.
August 20th, there was a bunch of contracts that got dumped I don't know. I think you said between 50 and 100 different miners. Is there any updates on that and getting those fixed?
You're talking about the flat lines?
Correct.
The flatlines are going through a pretty significant investigation process right now. It's a really interesting situation. Partly what we've wanted to do, because almost all the miners that have those, and it's not that large of a number, but the people that have those have, some reasonable amount of storage, is we want to push this through this process with our provider, our server provider. So what's happening right now is our core engineers are actually setting up some testing environments and hoping to use this population to go through, because we want to make sure that this issue, because it looks like it's going to be tied to our Kafka installation, we want to make sure that this isn't something that's going to break down when we hit really big scale. As far as it goes, as far as storage that's on your units, look, you just can't worry about it. If you're worried about it, all I can say is you just have to stop worrying about it. What'll end up happening when we're complete with this testing and investigation, we will make it right or do what we have to do so that, you don't end up missing out. One of the things that you can see very clearly right now is that we have the ability to target any population of providers that we want. The project is working. That's the really cool thing about this. You can get onto a relayer right now and you can choose a subset of providers that you want to store your data on, and it works as advertised, and it works really cool. So I fully expect that when we're done with this investigation that we will come back and we will handle it. But no, there is no status update on it. Internally, we're still grinding through our investigation.
Alrighty.
Hey, Ken.
Hey.
I know it was answered in the Discord, but Windows client, because I have a DIY, but it's running on Windows. I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that Henry told me in the Discord that you're working on the Windows client, so I'm going to upgrade for the SPFs. So that's more of just a comment. I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that.
Yeah, the way it's working right now, we're actually in a private beta. We've got a small handful of people that are actually testing the Windows installer. We do have a challenge in that our developer who's working on that specific application has a scheduled vacation. He actually left today for it. So we've got about 8 or 9 days ahead of us where he's going to be gone, but we're going to be bringing some more people in to test. And then ultimately we expect we'll launch publicly the full and upgrade Windows flavors probably in about 2 weeks. Nothing stopping you from going out and buying the license now and getting it going. And we're telling you that version is going to be released pretty shortly. It's working. It's got a couple of bugs and wrinkles. We know we need to work through them. In the end, what happens with the Windows client, by the way, is the installer is a native Windows application, but then ultimately you're running Docker, so you're running an installation that is not necessarily in Windows, which is what we're really targeting. We really don't want there to be too many native Windows applications on the network. So like I said, everybody's going to want this full application. Now's the time to really get into it because you get the rebates on it. You can get a chance to get ahead of the curve. And then everybody will be there by the time, we start really onboarding a lot of network. But yeah. And if you want to be involved in the beta testing, by the way, there's a channel for that where you can actually raise your hand and say that you want to be part of the beta test. But yes, thanks for telling us you're going to order. And it's a great point. You can go ahead and get your order done now and then pick up the license here in a couple of weeks and install it on a computer or even hold it for a month or two until you're ready to use it.
Cool. Thanks.
Sure.
Really cool to be here for the first time. I had a question. Wanted to know if there will be a feature in the future for examiner and DIY to have like a smart feature if your drive is failing and we can change that drive and the data will be flowing on a drive which is working and to prevent data loss.
It's probably on the cards. I don't know. It sounds like something we need to do a deep dive on and see if it's possible.
It is possible, and it does actually seem like something we would do in a future update. I mean, it's one of those kinds of things that will provide value to the unit. You know, the whole idea is set and forget. So if ultimately a drive begins to start exhibiting failure symptoms, why wouldn't we want to build in the capability to have that drive pulled? And we already have the feature built into SPD to automatically migrate data on a removed storage folder. So if smart data comes in and tells us, hey, this drive is at risk, or bad blocks have overrun a certain percentage, then perhaps having a removal of that storage folder happen automatically in supervisor seems like the kind of thing that we would perhaps implement. I can't say it's going to happen in the next, 45 days, but it does sound like something we would try and do.
Something like
Of course.
checking up an alert on your dashboard to maybe suggest that there's an issue that's about to happen could be a first step. It could be problematic to early migrate a machine on a pre-fail of a drive, because the pre-failure might not necessarily mean the drive's failing. So we can notify users and take it from there. Maybe if we hit some kind of error threshold, we could do the automatic migrations. I like that idea. It's nice.
That's cool to hear. Thanks, guys.
Good to hear from you too, Vay.
Yeah, I'm really surprised, actually. I would have expected the SPFs would have engendered a lot more sort of questions. Maybe you guys are experts on them now and have read up and are fully aware. But if not, we have a channel for it, and you have plenty of people to ask. And, there's not really a lot to them. It's really a matter of just sort of understanding what they are and why they exist. And I do want to finish, I guess I will cover this because this is something I meant to cover in terms of how they work. The reason why they actually exist, by the way, isn't to do anything, that we're, talking about as far as rewarding anybody in the project or whatever. I mean, the real reason that they exist is because you have to go back to the evolution then revolution idea that we have, brought to the table here in crypto. And the idea being that we're really trying to do something that we kind of call Web 2.5 or whatever, where we believe we've built the best back-end decentralized network. We believe that our distributed renter fulfills the idea of a back-end data sovereign ability for a customer to always own and maintain possession of their data. They never send their data to me. I never have access to look at their data. I don't get into their data, which is quite different from the way Amazon and Google and everybody else works today. And ultimately, it's going to be the norm, I think, going forward. They're going to have to get into that place. Unless, something crazy happens and the NSA wins some crazy court case that says that people have to surrender access to everything. But that really kind of goes against our Constitution, so I don't know how that would work, but maybe it does. But in regards to that, if things do go the way they should go, this idea of having a decentralized distributed renter is the first key step. And the other people in crypto aren't doing this. They're doing other things. They're finding other ways to get to Web3, and they're not good ways. They're actually pretty poor ways. And Henry's actually written a good article comparing our storage project with others that are out there in crypto. But the idea being is that we do have some pretty key centralization on our project, and it's in one specific place. And it's that contractor, right? We contract all the data with all of the providers. So what ends up happening is a customer comes and gives us dollars, and then we go ahead and form a contract and put SCP into the contract and do that. The beauty of that is really simple. When it comes time for Web3 to really take off, it's going to be trivially easy for us to turn over contracting to the individual relayers, right? We'll either turn it over where everybody runs their own contractor, or we'll create a layer where people can actually run contractor nodes and then reach up and talk to the contractor nodes to form contracts. No matter how we end up doing it, it's going to be trivially easy for us to push that out there when it comes time to do Web3. But the problem there is when we do push it out there, let's say tomorrow we decided Web3 was here and ready to go, And we threw out all of a sudden the contractor so that it was on every relayer, and customers were no longer paying us dollars to store, data. They might be paying us dollars for certain kinds of consultative services or other applications that we've, provisioned on top. Maybe we're starting to run something like a Dropbox file sharing service or something, or we're running our own version of VM or something like that. They may pay us dollars for that, but at the end of the day, when we get to Web3, what will end up happening is customers will go out and acquire SCP themselves, right? And just plug it into the contracts themselves. And right now, that's just not something that business is interested in. They just don't want that responsibility. They don't want to go out and have to, buy a bunch of cryptocurrency tokens, put them somewhere in a wallet, protect them, keep them under lock and key, and then watch as they go crazy volatility wise because Bitcoin decides to go berserk one day up or down, right? They don't want that right now. What they want is they want somebody else to do that. And that's the Web 2.5. But when it comes time, they'll send them out there. All right. What does that have to do with SPFs? Well, we own 60% of the population of SPFs. And so right now what happens is the contracts come in, we form them with you guys, and then, as I said, the renter, us, goes ahead and pays for the entirety of the contract. So we turn around and we pay a bunch of SCP back to us, right? We just take up what is essentially a kickback back to us. It's not coming out of your money. You get your money. It's coming out of our money. So we're just giving ourselves our money back. And we're giving our investors a benefit, a dividend. So the people that, took care of us early on with some cash are getting cash back from us from those contracts. But that 60% of the supply will be the way we generate income and revenue going forward when we move to Web3, right? Those will be how we continue to fund development. Those will be how we make money to pay the lights. Those will be how we make our money to run the servers and the Grafana and network engineering and all of the stuff that we have to do. So that's one of the reasons why we aren't really talking very loudly right now about selling any more of these things. We need to keep as many of them as possible because they are our future. They are the way we go forward. And ultimately, if you think that the SCPs are scarce, and they definitely are, these things are going to be scarcer than anything because essentially they are going to, generate an ongoing verifiable income off of this network. And, when we're actually out there doing marketing and sales of storage and we bring people on board and we're on a self-service Web3 basis, we have a way to continue to make money. So they're a really great vehicle all across the board. And ultimately, I think they're going to turn out to be a great thing for the project. So if there are no more questions, we'll go ahead and end the call. You can ask any further questions in the events channel or in the SPF channel. Some great info today. And I think ultimately you guys are going to be pretty happy about how this all turns out. And, God willing, the creek don't rise. We will get through this difficult bear market. We will get over our hump for funding. And ultimately, we will emerge as the strongest entity doing distributed storage in crypto or outside of crypto, because we have the best community, we have the best network, we have the best software, we have the best developers, we have the best everything. So that's us and that's you. And thanks everybody for showing up today.